In the JavaScript that I use with my feed reader program, you might have noticed that I've got this section, try, and all this code is enclosed between a pair of curly brackets, followed by catch, and then there's parentheses with exc, which is the name, in this case, of an error or exception object. And that error or exception object will be generated if some sort of problem that JavaScript can't deal with occurs in the code between try and the catch block. And in this case, it just displays a message that is provided by the exception object. Now, what sort of condition could generate this error? Well, here's an example. I've uploaded a new version of this code, but I've commented out the code that actually creates the request object. So this is to simulate a bug in my code, assuming that I try to open a request object without first creating it. So let's see what happens when I refresh my browser. And here it is. It says error, request is undefined. So at least I've got some sort of meaningful error message. Now, JavaScript error handling has more complexity associated with it than I am going to be discussing in this lesson, but I'm going to give you the fundamental features of error handling, and you can look at the course book, the ebook, for more resources if you want to go into some of the extra options available to you. In JavaScript, there are various different specific types of error. You can look online again to see exactly which are available, but they include things such as range error and type error. And in your code, you can test for specific types of errors if you want to recover from them in known circumstances. And let me take a look at an example of that. So here in the errors.html sample file, I've got a couple of buttons and they call a couple of functions, and the first button calls test and it passes to it an array, and the test function then takes array item number 2 and it attempts to convert it to lowercase. Well, here I've sent it 3 integers, so that's not going to work. And let's see how that happens. I'm again running this in Firefox with a debugging console in case I want to do any debugging. Let's refresh it to make sure I've got the latest version and click test. And it says here string expected, and it gives me a lot of information about what the problem is. And that's because in my code I've got this try catch section. So first of all, I get the array item at index number 2, and I try to convert it to lowercase. The try block here protects that bit of code, and if an error is generated, then the catch or the multiple catch blocks are run to deal with it. The first catch block deals with a specific type of error, and the syntax here is I get the error object E and I test if E is an instance of type error. And if so, I say, well, I need a string expected, and the error object gives me 2 bits of information. E.name provides the error object's name, and E.message provides its message. And if no error is caught in that section, then the next catch section executes. That's a generic catch. It doesn't specify any particular type of error, and it deals with all other types of error. So just go back to the code and try it again. And there you see it says the type error was caught, and it gives me the message provided by the error object, says 2 lowercase is not a function. It's not a function of the integer which I sent it. Let me correct that and put in a string. Try it again. Refresh. And this time it works. Now the next button, that attempts to create a new array. Let's have a look at the code here. So this time I have 2 specific catch blocks for 2 specific types of error, type error and a range error. The try block contains some code which attempts to create a new array of a given length, and it's the length which is sent as the argument. Well, 100 is valid, but what if I put an invalid argument, make it minus 100? Well, I can't create an array with a minus value size, so let's refresh my browser, try it again. And this time it's caught a range error, and it's provided some more information. Now you have to be a little bit careful with JavaScript error handling, because if you've come from a strictly typed language, one of the C family of languages, C#, Java, Objective-C, C++, and so on, or a strongly typed language such as Object Pascal, you will be able to trap a lot more errors with more reliability, because the error checking can easily check whether the types and so on are correct. Now you can get away with some odd things in JavaScript error checking. For example, you might think that if I enter a string instead of a number, then that will be caught by the type error. It's the wrong type. I'm expecting a number to initialize my array, but in fact, when I run it, once again refresh, and there is no error. And that's because in JavaScript, when it comes across this code, I send to it a string, it calls the array constructor, and if you pass it a string item, it just creates an array and it puts the string into the array. So my checking doesn't trap what I would have thought would have been a type error, because it's valid syntax in the constructor. And similarly here, if instead of passing an array, I pass a string, and run it again, click the button, I'm not, in fact, generating an error, because, let's have a look at it. I say I'm expecting an array to be received, but I get a string. Well, I can index into a string, so when I try to get the value and set it to lowercase, I get a character from the string and I set it to lowercase, so it's perfectly valid. So just bear in mind that JavaScript is quite fluid. It's not as strict in the way it deals with data as a strongly typed language, and it lets you get away with things which you might expect to be an error if you've come from a strongly typed language.